Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg ended in a controversial, close decision where it looks like a lot of people believe that Steve Erceg should have gotten the victory, some even claiming robbery against him, as Pantoja was deemed the victor after the fight. It was a great fight. Steve Erceg showed everybody, if you work at Best Buy, you can definitely make your way to fighting the champion of the world. Chase your dreams, kids. But what did the judges see in this fight? Two judges scored it 3-2 for Alexandre Pantoja, give him the first, third, and fifth rounds. One of the judges, David Torelli, scored it 49-46, gave Alexandre Pantoja 4 rounds including the second. It's always one of these judges have to one-up the others, but people are mostly agreeing that the most controversial rounds are the third and the fifth. Third by far being the closest round of the fight. The fifth round, some are even saying that Erceg could have won that round based off damage, as Pantoja didn't really do much on the ground when he got it there. Well, we're going to see. We're going to start with the third round, and what we know from the judging criteria is damage trumps all with the striking, but grappling is also going to count. The closer a fighter gets to contribute to a finish, including grappling, is what's going to be scored the highest. Now, to make it the most accurate possible, we're going to be looking at each of these strikes and categorize them light, medium, or heavy. Light strikes are not really going to matter. We're going to be focusing a lot more on the medium and heavy, and we have to know that it's the blow of the shots, like the reactions they get, not necessarily how hard they're throwing them. And if there's any lacerations, bruises, swelling, any of that stuff is going to count for effective striking. Let's get right into that third round. Now, the first strike that lands is from Alexandre Pantoja, landing a very good leg kick as Erceg is stepping inward, posting with his left hand, not necessarily throwing a jab, but he's trying to line up an elbow that actually gets blocked by Pantoja with one hand. Pantoja counters him with a jab down the center, as Erceg is always moving his head away from each of these punches, and Erceg tries to hit him with a right body kick, which also hits the arm. You can count this as a block. Pantoja hits him a third time in the sequence, another grazing jab this time, and almost lands a right hand as Erceg is moving away from it. The punch actually never connects and never reaches the target. You're going to see this a lot from Erceg whenever Pantoja's throwing that right hand of his. Then they both land jabs on each other, not really doing much damage at all. Now, there is this right hook from Erceg, but it misses the target and slightly hits the head with the forearm, not really going to cause anything here. And in the clinch, Pantoja tries to throw a knee, which looks like it may have grazed the body and skid past it. As you can see, the knee is right over here. Really hard to tell from the camera angle, but we'll come back to it if we have to. Regardless, it didn't seem to cause any damage. But this knee from Pantoja absolutely lands. And this knee seems to have gotten blocked by Erceg's right arm. As you can see, when Pantoja is retracting the knee, you can see Erceg's arm is between the knee and his body. Then Erceg returns the knee to the leg, doesn't really do too much, and Pantoja throws another knee to the body as Erceg is looking to rotate and reverse the position up against the fence. While that's happening, Pantoja is able to throw another knee as he's getting pushed up against the fence. Now they both land on each other. Pantoja lands a jab while Erceg throws a left hook around the guard. Now Erceg goes and throws a leg kick, and it looks like Pantoja tries to check it, but we cannot see if he actually does. Then they both partially land on each other again. Erceg with another left hook and Pantoja with a strange lead uppercut. Then we get to another sequence here. Erceg lands a front kick to the body, which Pantoja partially parries away after it connects. And Pantoja lands a 3-punch combination to the body, starting it off with a jab that really doesn't do anything, but is looking to wing over a right hook to the ribs, and on the way in, Erceg connects with a good counter left hook to the head, which Pantoja just somehow walks right through. It was a clean shot. He lands another left to the body that doesn't really do anything before Erceg is able to get away from him. Then they both land on each other again. Erceg with a jab that doesn't really get much of a reaction out of Pantoja, and Pantoja is able to instantly land a big leg kick. Clean shot from Pantoja. This jab from Pantoja looks like it bounces off the neck. Doesn't really do anything to Erceg. Now they both throw an uppercut at each other. Erceg's may have grazed, but it's really hard to tell. Looks more like it just missed the target, but Pantoja's absolutely lands to the body, but doesn't get much of a reaction out of Steve Erceg, who throws a left hook immediately, landing with the forearm around the head, dragging Pantoja's head to the side as he throws a right hook around the back, bouncing off the body. Pantoja lands another right hook to the same spot, reaches with the left hook that looks like it almost hits the groin, and Erceg was able to get away after. Then they both engage yet again, and Steve Erceg lands a perfectly placed intercepting left hook as Pantoja is running into him. Bam! big shot from Erceg, the biggest shot of the round so far, as Pantoja's right hand goes behind and hits the back, which doesn't do anything. Pantoja throws another right overhand, and he's wrapping around Erceg's head, also hitting the back of it. And Pantoja throws a knee, but it's hard to tell if it lands. It looks like Erceg pulled his head away from the knee before it connects, but to be fair, we can't see it from the camera angle at all. Then Erceg starts poking Pantoja from range, lands a jab, later extends a lead front kick to the body, which gets partially parried after it connects. Neither of these shots really doing much damage to Pantoja. Then they both land shots on each other. Pantoja leads it with a right hand to the body that doesn't really do much as Erceg is moving away. Then they both graze their left hands on each other, grazing the chin and then going under. They both land on each other again, Erceg with a grazing jab and Pantoja with another leg kick, but this one doesn't cause as much damage. They get into another exchange where Erceg grazes an overhand off the top of the head, doesn't really do anything, and they both throw left hooks at each other, but Erceg's misses as Pantoja lands with like the palm of his hand, and Pantoja ends the exchange with a grazing right hand as Erceg is moving away from it. That doesn't cause much damage. Erceg extends a long left hook to the body as Pantoja is moving away. Doesn't seem to get much of a reaction out of Pantoja. Then they get to another exchange with each other. Erceg is switching stances forward and seems to connect with a right hook, slightly turning Pantoja's head, and he goes and swings over the left hook, which also connects on Pantoja, but Pantoja is throwing his own right overhand, moving his head along the same direction, that hits the back of the head of Steve Erceg. Now to be fair, Steve was turning at the same time, which caused the forearm to hit the back of his head, and somehow Pantoja eats these shots, man. Then they're both standing their ground right in front of each other and fire out their right hands. Pantoja seems to have missed, whereas Erceg lands flush on the face of Pantoja as he somehow eats that shot, man. Now here's where it gets kind of tricky to categorize the damage of that kind of punch. You would think if Erceg hit anybody like this, it would cause a lot of damage, but to Pantoja, it didn't really seem to have caused that much damage. Now it can seem unfair for a guy that has a really good chin to help him against effective striking, but here's the thing. The way that it's written out, it's about who gets closer to finishing the fight. If you have a stronger chin, that's going to help you even on the scoring, because you're not going to get closer to getting finished, as some other guys would. Steve Erceg hit Matt Schnell with that punch. Matt Schnell's going to sleep, but he hits Pantoja, and Pantoja barely feels it. So when you look at the judging criteria, when it says that a fighter needs to show that he's losing his fighting spirit, the punch has some kind of effect on him, we don't see that from Pantoja taking this punch. So how can we score it big for Erceg? Right? You can't score it a heavy. Can you score a medium? It doesn't show that kind of reaction. That's the only thing here. Didn't cut him up or anything like that. But it does feel weird to score that as a light strike as well. I'm gonna go with a medium here, but it could be wrong. Now Erceg is moving away from Pantoja, but Pantoja was still able to land a jab toward the end of the punch. Now Pantoja goes and throws a leg kick and actually hits the back leg of Steve Erceg, interesting enough. And Steve goes and throws a right hook immediately afterward that wraps around the guard, and it looks like his fist, or like the palm side of his fist, seemed to have hit toward the back of the head of Pantoja. But to be fair, Pantoja was also turning his head, facing Steve Erceg after throwing the kick. Now Pantoja goes and throws a right hook to the body, but he's using it to close distance and grab a hold of Steve Erceg. The right hand does hit the ribs though, and against the fence, Pantoja lands two knees, and they get into another exchange. Erceg is throwing the left hook as Pantoja grazes a jab, and as usual, follows up with the right hand and grazes an overhand off the top of the head. Both punches not really doing much damage. Erceg lands a snap kick to the body that seems to have got a pretty good reaction out of Pantoja, who was trying to move forward. Pantoja fires right after that, a right hook to the body. Erceg counters him with a left hook to the side of the head, and Pantoja ends the exchange, landing a left uppercut toward the body as well. The biggest shot in this exchange was that snap kick from Steve Erceg. Then they both land jabs on each other at the same time. That happened twice between them, and as Erceg slips on the inside of the right hand, he lands a big looping left hook to the side of the head of Pantoja that gets a better reaction out of Pantoja. Then they get into another exchange where Pantoja grazes a jab that doesn't really do much, doesn't cause much damage, and Erceg lands a huge elbow to the forehead that causes a huge cut. But Pantoja is throwing the right hand at the same time and lands it on Steve Erceg that doesn't really get much of a reaction. And then they both land left hooks on each other. Steve Erceg seems to be a little bit stronger, but Pantoja is still firing through all the damage, trying to get one up on Erceg, who's now moving away, but gets taken down by Pantoja up against the fence. Now, that elbow is 100% a heavy strike, not only because of the way he lands it, but adding on top of that the cut makes it easily the most damaging shot of the round so far. The cut was really bad, where even Pantoja was trying to cover it up. I mean, look how bad the leaking is. I'm gonna have to make it black and white here, but you can tell just off of the outline on Steve Erceg's face, that's not coming from him. But as he stands up, Pantoja takes him down yet again. Up against the fence and on the ground, Steve Erceg lands 3 strikes, whereas Pantoja lands 2, but one of them kind of hits the back of the head. Now, what did Pantoja do with the takedowns? So he went for half guard, which he got, didn't do anything with it, so that's not really going to count much for effective grappling, but he did try to get the back, which he didn't get full control of. He got one hook in, and Erceg defended the full control of the back take, as well as getting out of it entirely. Without Pantoja going for a rear naked choke, he only really landed one punch that wasn't even that damaging. And at the very end of the round, Pantoja takes him down for the 3rd time, but does nothing with it because he ran out of time. So, who won the 3rd round? Let's tally up all the damage and look at the grappling sequences in comparison to the damage, which we know that it's not really going to compare too much. Pantoja didn't do much with his grappling. Pantoja landed 8 more total strikes, but Erceg had 2 more medium and the only heavy strike of the entire round. Purely off of damage, Steve Erceg trumped Pantoja, but what about the grappling? Pantoja didn't do much on top besides almost getting a full back take, and even at that, he didn't complete it. So you would have to give the 3rd round a 10-9 for Steve Erceg. And now let's just look at the 5th round here, just to get a more accurate scoring. So the first strike that landed in the 5th round was a jab from Erceg, but then later he follows up with a really good leg kick as Pantoja's trying to punch over it, but he gets countered by a big left hook from Erceg, and it just doesn't cause damage to the guy. What is his chin made out of? Do you know how many times Matt Schnell would have gotten knocked out by that punch? Then they both throw a left hand at each other. Erceg is able to move away from the jab and get his head slightly on the outside of it as he throws a left hook that seems to have grazed the nose of Pantoja. Then they both land jabs on each other. Erceg lands first, that doesn't really do much damage to Pantoja. Pantoja follows up with his after, again doesn't cause much damage, but Pantoja gets super aggressive and runs into the overhand from Erceg that gets a pretty good reaction in Pantoja standards. The punch completely stopped him in his tracks, which is something that's very rare to do to Pantoja, and you can see a bit of the impact from the punch. Then Erceg gets the double leg takedown on Pantoja, flipping the script on him for a second. A lot of people missed this low blow from Pantoja, keeping his foot on the groin. John Jones is probably jealous, but then Pantoja's able to get up, reverse it by taking Erceg to the ground. So we saw that Erceg wasn't really able to do anything with his takedown. Does Pantoja do anything with his? Because they have to do something in order for the takedowns to count and for anything to count for effective grappling. No, Erceg lands a punch and stands up. Erceg did grab the cage, but you could say that Pantoja hit him low like 3-4 times throughout the fight. It is something to point out though. Up against the fence, Erceg lands 3 elbows on the top of the head of Pantoja before getting taken down again. Does Pantoja do anything with this takedown? No. Steve Erceg stands up pretty quickly. Then they get back into the striking, and then Pantoja lands a light jab that doesn't really do anything to Erceg. Pantoja gets aggressive and tries to land another jab, but Erceg slips on the inside of it and lands a big right overhand to the jaw, stopping Pantoja in his tracks. So it was actually a pretty good punch, but not enough to cause like major damage to Pantoja specifically. That's another shot that a lot of other fighters would not take that well. Then Erceg partially lands a head kick that gets partially blocked from Pantoja just with one arm. That gets a pretty good reaction out of Pantoja, which of course is going to knock him a bit off balance because he was throwing a jab at the same time. And you know, partially blocked head kicks still can easily cause a lot of damage on somebody. You have to fully block those. Erceg grazes a front kick to the head, barely touches Pantoja. If this was a round kick, it would have been a whole different story, but he threw it as a front kick straight upwards, therefore not causing really any damage to Pantoja. Then Erceg grazes a left hook as Pantoja is moving into him. Doesn't cause any damage, but Pantoja lands a left hook of his own that really doesn't cause any damage. It was the way that he landed the punch. It was like palm side of the fist in a slapping motion, full arm extended. Then they both land a jab on each other. Steve Erceg follows it up with a right hand toward the chest, and then Erceg lands another jab before Pantoja gets aggressive, swinging haymakers at Erceg. And look at Erceg's defense. He covers up intelligently. He puts his left arm toward the elbow crease inside of Pantoja's right haymaker, blocking the punch entirely, and he intercepts Pantoja with a hard elbow that cuts him up again. this time on the right side of the eyebrow. A heavy strike for Steve Erceg, and easily the biggest shot of the round so far. They both go and throw jabs at each other, but Erceg slips Pantoja's jab and counters with his own. A leg kick for Pantoja kinda lands as Erceg was also looking to check it. Doesn't really cause much damage. Pantoja gets aggressive again, throwing haymakers, and gets hit by another clean, powerful counter left hook from Steve Erceg. You can see how the punch turns his head to the side like that, but Pantoja is still going forward throwing punches and lands a slapping left hook on Erceg. And you could tell from that cut from earlier in this round, look how bad it's gotten. That's a big part of the definition of effective striking. Then Pantoja lands a pretty good leg kick on Erceg. A jab from Erceg lands, and then there goes the takedown from Erceg, which gets Granby rolled, reversed by Pantoja. And let's see if Pantoja does anything while on top. On the ground, Pantoja was able to get into the full mount as far as he went and landed some good punches while there too. But he settled mostly in the half guard position, landing some good punches as well. Steve Erceg landed 4 punches on the ground. Pantoja landed 11, with a couple of those actually being medium punches as well. And that ends the 5th round. Let's tally up all the damage and look at the grappling sequences between the two. Erceg landed 7 more total strikes. He had 1 more medium, and he had the only heavy strike of the entire round, clearly out-damaging Alexandre Pantoja. But what about the grappling? Pantoja was able to get full mount. He did land some good punches when he was there, mostly settled in the half guard position. Would that be enough to trump the damage that Erceg inflicted on him? I don't think so. He never threatened submissions. He never really put Erceg in too much danger. Even with the ground and pound, he didn't inflict that much damage compared to what Erceg did to him. So because of the damage, you would have to give the 5th round a 10-9 for Steve Erceg. So, did the judges get this fight correct? They did not. Absolutely not. Steve Erceg, at the very least, won this fight 48-47. I argue even 49-46, purely based off damage. This is kind of what I thought when I watched it live as well. I had Steve Erceg winning and even thought he could have gotten 4 rounds out of that fight. Taking down Erceg at the end of the round and holding top position, I think tricked a lot of people to thinking that Pantoja won the round. But you have to look at the entire round, where Erceg clearly outdamaged Pantoja in almost all of them. The only round that was clearly Pantoja's was the first, basically because Erceg actually didn't cause that much damage in that round. But the 2nd to the 5th, all the damage was on Erceg's side. And when you look at the grappling from Pantoja, it just didn't compare. He didn't get any chokes, he didn't get any submissions, he wasn't even really attempting them. Most of what he was doing was holding position, and according to the scoring rules, that is just not enough. He landed some good ground and pound here and there, but just not on the level of what Steve Erceg was doing in the stand-up. So Steve Erceg absolutely won this fight. Was it a robbery? Probably, because it's just really hard to see how Pantoja won the fight. Even being generous to the judges, it's very hard to see how they score that fight for Pantoja, and it's more obvious after you rewatch the fight. So they did our man dirty. Steve from Best Buy got robbed and probably would not want to fight in Brazil ever again. The number 10 ranked fighter deserves to be the champion. That's how good he is. But even if he didn't get it today, he's absolutely getting that belt in the future. Steve Erceg is only going to get better from this. Hopefully. Hopefully if he keeps his confidence intact and all that stuff. So officially, he's not going to be the champion, but he should be in the top 5. 100%. He needs to be in the top 5. There's no way he's under someone like Muhammad Mokaev. So I hope you guys enjoyed the scoring video, and if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which should be coming up very soon.